Hey, this is Don from Padlock Technologies again with another video. This is going to be a continuation of my next generation firewall comparison videos. You've already seen me do a ton of stuff on the FTD. I will go ahead and put something up here to point you in the direction of all my FTD videos. I did a Palo Alto video, an overview video. I'm going to do a Fortinet video and a checkpoint video. Remember, I told you I know a lot of firewalls, worked on a lot of firewalls in different environments, so I can kind of tell you and give you a comparison of that. So this is the same lab environment that we had before with a bunch of Palo Altos, and I'll get back to doing videos about Palo Altos. I did one on virtual wires and stuff like that, but I'll give them more videos on some other features of the Palo Alto. But over here, what do we have? We have, what's this? Checkpoints. And we have a Fortinet here. Now, the checkpoint is the OG, the super triple OG next generation firewall, because they are, I believe my history serves me correct, they were the inventors of the stateful firewall, right? Now, the good thing about checkpoint software is it doesn't need to actually come on checkpoint hardware. You can install this on a computer. Yeah, a like tower computer and install the checkpoint software because there's an ISO image for this where you can install it bare metal, right? But this firewall was like the go-to firewall in the enterprise market before Palo existed, before the FTD existed, before Fortinet existed. You will always see Checkpoint in the enterprise environment back in the day. Now, that has unfortunately changed because if you're really looking at it, like I said, most next generation firewalls are the same when it comes to like Palo, FTD, and Fortinet. Checkpoint works completely different, right? So the one thing I want to point to you though is you see two of them in this corner here. Now, one is the actual security gateway, the other one is the SMS or the security management server. What does that sound like? Sounds like Panorama, right? Sounds like FMC, right? Or SMC, if you want to call it that. Sounds like Fortinet, right? Again, Checkpoint was the first, right, to introduce separate management like master slave configurations, right? So what you could technically do is you could have, and actually you can HA two SMSs together. But what you would technically do is have your SMS over to the side, and then you can control the security gateways, and the data plane would still work, but all your management function and stuff like that would be on the SMS. Again, everybody copies somebody and then just calls it something different. Checkpoint was the first, and then everybody else came after. And when I do the Checkpoint and FortiGate video comparison, well, when I do the FortiGate video comparison, I'm going to show you something in the Checkpoint that if you look at the FortiGate GUI, it's in there. So again, it's not about trying to have your own secret sauce because everybody does their thing a little bit differently. But let's be for real, inventing new features and new ways to do things and new ways to manage makes everything better. And the whole space gets better because hey, if I can, take a little piece of what Checkpoint does and put it in a Fortinet, it makes Fortinet a little bit better. If Checkpoint sees something that's Fortinet doing, and they can kind of implement it in their own way, it makes a checkpoint better. So the more inventions or more features and things come out in the firewall space, everybody wins. The consumer actually wins in the long term, right? Competition ultimately helps the consumer in the long run. So the one thing I'll do is we're going to go into the computer here. This is going to be my management computer, and I'm going to show you the web interface of a checkpoint, and then I'm going to show you actually how you manage some of the things on a checkpoint. So let's scroll over here. We are now in that management machine. So the GUI looks like this. Now, this is the secure gateway. This is my SMS here. So we're going to log into the SMS first. All right, so hopefully I remember it. Now, the funny thing about this is the way you configure it from the CLI standpoint, checkpoints and Palo Altos are configured the same way. They use the set command. Right now, obviously, there's different stuff in different CLIs. Like in checkpoint, once you get used to it, it's probably one of the easiest CLIs to kind of configure. FortiGate kind of uses configure system interface, edit the interface, and then you use the set command to set the actual parameters. And then Palo Alto does the same thing with the set command where you can set different commands. They do have a config mode. You get into config mode, then you can do set whatever to configure certain things on the interface. You show commands and stuff like that. But this is the GUI of the SMS, or the security management server. As you can see, the GUI is only networking stuff. It is not the actual policy and NAT curation stuff. So they separate, like I showed you in the PA, right? You can do your networking and your routing and all that on GUI, right? FTD, same thing. Fortinet, same thing. Checkpoints is not the same thing. Checkpoint, you can configure most of your routing stuff here, your interface stuff, your DHCP server stuff, your NetFlow stuff at the GUI. You can configure your multicast or advanced routings here, user management, high availability, which they call cluster XL. Okay, because Fortinet has, HA, active standby, stuff like that. PA's active standby. FTD's active standby cluster, and then Checkpoint has this thing called Cluster XL, which is basically either active or active passive. Most people are gonna do active standby. Right? You got VRRP, which would be your old traditional high availability, but again, Cluster XL is really the technology or HA technology that you want to use on a checkpoint. Now, you're probably asking, all right, so we got everything here. What do I need if I wanted to manage the actual security policies, NAT policies, Blade features? As you can see, manage software Blade with Smart Console. So you actually have to download a separate piece, and then I'm going to point it to the security management gateway, which is this .2, and then you would add the security gateway using this thing called a SIC connection, which is secure internal communication. It's sort of like on an FTD, the FS tunnel, right? The FS tunnel, which is the management tunnel on TCP 8305, by the way, just in case y'all guys want to know that on a test, it's TCP 8305. That's the SF tunnel status on an FTD. Palo Altos have their own management with Panorama. Uh, Forta FortiGates have Forta Manager, which has its own management function. But with this, you have to download the Smart Console, right? Everything else has a GUI interface to it, right? Checkpoints, no. You have to download this thing called a Smart Console. Then you have to point it to your SMS if you do not have the SMS function on the security gateway. When you set up the checkpoint, it asks you, hey, do you want to make this a security gateway or a security gateway and a security manager? If you combine the two, you would just point it to the box, right? If you split out the two, you point it to the security manager, and then you add the security gateway to it. And then once you add the security gateway to it, you can start activating these blades. Firewall functions, generic firewall function. IPsec tunnels, that's another blade that you can activate. IPS is another active blade you can activate. Application control, which is basically App ID on Palo Alto, which is basically Eve on FTD. That's a blade that you can activate. URL filter. Everybody knows what URL filtering is. That's a blade. Antivirus. What did we see on the Palo Alto? We saw antivirus. So as you can see, the logic overlaps once you know one. Anti-bot, threat emulations, threat extraction. This is kind of like threat grid features on that combines with FTDs. Anti-spam, anti-malware, data loss prevention. You saw on Palo Alto, data loss prevention, mobile stuff, content awareness. That's content ID on a Palo Alto. So it's a lot of stuff that overlaps, right? Now, like I said, this was the OG firewall before anything. This is why you saw this in a lot of enterprise environments, because they were the first to really have all of these blades or features that you could add onto a firewall. So it wasn't your traditional layer 1 through 4 firewall. Right now you have 1 through 7 and 8 if you want to call the user a layer, because that's one of the most important layers, because you got the users that don't know how to configure it. 7 through 1 is not going to work. Little IT joke there. So now that we're in, I'm gonna get out of the manager, and now I already have Smart Console up. So this is what Smart Console actually looks like, and we'll ask again later. So this is what Smart Console looks like. So we're gonna go to the beginning. So in the beginning, when you log in, you will only see the SMS when you log into it, right? I added this security gateway and I activated the following blades. Now to add a security gateway, it's literally the same. If you ever added a firewall and an FTD, it is literally the same thing. So what you would do is hit this little star button here, hit new, you would hit gateway, you would go to wizard mode, and then you would put in the name, the platform, whatever you're using. I'm using Open Server. Again, you can put this, you don't actually need to have Checkpoint software or Checkpoint hardware. You can actually install this on a computer, per se, bare metal, and use that as a Checkpoint firewall because it's using the software. Then you put the static IP in there, and then it's going to ask you for the SIC user or the one-time password, which you set up when you set up the security gateway. I just made it a simple password. Once you connect to it, you add the right one-time password, it will now put the security gateway into the SMS, so something that it can manage. Now, remember I was talking about blades? So if you do not, at the end of when you add the device into the security manager, it will give you an option to go directly to the properties of the box. If you don't do that, you need to come in here and hit edit. And this is where you activate the blades. So you got a whole bunch of other stuff, network management, which is like your, VPN domains. Encryption domains are what they call in Checkpoint encryption domains. When you do site to sites, when you do site to sites, the concept is, hub and spoke to spoke communication, stuff like that. You have your NAT policies, advanced policy, IPS inspection. The IPS inspection function on here is a little weird. Again, they do it totally different than the brand new or new next generation firewalls. When I say new generation firewalls, think of Palo, FTD, FortiGate. Now these are the blades. So when you hear, when I think I said in the last video, everybody has profiles compared to blades. So Palo Alto's profiles, Fortinet profiles, FTD's policies, Checkpoint's blades. When you activate the blades, now you can do the policies. All right, so what we have here, what I activated here was firewall, application control, URL filtering, content awareness, and some monitoring stuff. So that's really the only thing that I activated. So now that that's there, everything is activated. Remember what I told you in the last video, you need to be able to get this thing on the internet. As you can see, your first your first thing, if you can't get this to happen, you're going to have a hard time figuring out the firewall, right? Once you get this, now you can just start adding on knowledge of the other features of the firewall. Always keep that in the back of your mind when you're learning a new firewall. The first thing you need to be able to do is get a machine behind the firewall to talk to the internet. After you get that done, now you can just try to figure out everything else. All right. So how did I allow that to happen? Now, the one thing I will tell you is when we go to security policies, this is the main thing, security policies. So as you can see, I have regular access control policies, which is your policies, which is your security policies and your NAT policies. Then you have your threat prevention stuff that you can configure. And then you have your SSL decryption policies, but you would need to have a SSL key or a certificate on there to actually get that to work. VPN communities, that's your site-to-site VPNs. They call it communities on Checkpoint. And then custom policies here. I don't have any custom policies, so I don't really have to worry about that because I don't have a custom policy. As you can see, I have some profiles here. I have IPS protection policies, and you got all this other stuff here. Threat emulation, antivirus. This is a whole profile right here, custom policy that I have not installed on any firewall yet. Because as you can see, when you see, I'm gonna explain this right now in the policy. So the policies here is top down. The cleanup rule is basically your default deny rule that you would see on a, Palo Alto, on a Fortinet, on a FTD, right? Default rule. Now, the default rule here is I'm actually going to do this now. The default rule is the cleanup rule is denying everything drop. I could technically log this if I wanted to see what was dropped. Yeah, I'm gonna log it. So under track, you would hit log or the down arrow, hit log. Now, here's the thing that I was talking about assigning a certain rule to a certain security gateway. When you see this install over here, it says install on. Thankfully, my video is not blocking it, but it says install on right here. You want to hit the plus button, and I want to install this on my security gateway. Now, unmatched traffic will be logged. And we ain't got to do that. So, this is just saying missing cleanup rule, unmatched traffic will be dropped and not logged. So I'm logging it. Now, all because I made this change does not mean it's actually live. You have and in Checkpoint, you have to publish it first, and then you have to install it. Sort of like with everything else, other than Palo Alto in Checkpoint, there's really no save per se, right? In FTDs, every time you make a change, you got to click the save button. The publish button is the save is basically saying, hey, I want the next time you go to install a policy, whatever I publish is going to get pushed. So if I hit this publish button up here, because as you can see, the session, right? The session will have a number that increments of how many times I change something. So I made two changes, logs, and I installed it, right? So if I hit the publish button and say publish, and then I go up here to install, where am I at here? Install policy, and then this little window will come up once I click it. There we go. It's going to install it on the security gateway, right? It's going to install it on that security gateway, and then you hit install, and then down here is where it's going to be installing. Doesn't that look familiar? Doesn't this look familiar? You do this on a Palo, it's the same thing. Gives you a task, right? You do this on FTD. What does it give you? A task, right? So as you can see, you do this in for the manager, same thing, gives you a task, right? And you're pushing something out to the slave boxes, right? Now, here's a management rule. Now, this is specific to Checkpoint because they will ask you an interview question about this. So this is Checkpoint management. So this is saying my host can talk to the security gateway and the manager. I kind of don't need the manager per se because I can use an access rule to do that. So I can technically remove this object here and then hit publish. And then I'll push that policy out. So what this is basically doing is I'll explain the top rule basically says the management host, which is the host that we're on, going to this server or this security gateway can go to it, right? If I try to push it. This stealth rule says anything outside of this host trying to go to the management of the security gateway is dropped and it will be logged. And I installed it on, you know what? Let me do this. Move myself over here just a tad bit so you can see it. So what that's going to do is say anything going to the security gateway, which is the firewall itself, for anything we're going to drop and we're going to log it and we're going to install it all of that on these firewalls. Now, technically, if you wanted to install this on multiple firewalls, when you hit the plus button, you would see all of your security gateways that you want to install this specific rule on. See, this is the difference between the other firewall platforms. The FTD has its own ACP, access control policy. So then you would tie that access control policy to the specific FTD. Palo Alto's, same thing until you start getting into active. Load balance, and then you can change the NAT rule to one firewall versus the next one. But the security policies are pretty much universal, right? It's per that firewall. Fortinet, unless you're using FortiGate, FortiManager, you can't really do this. Checkpoint, you can. So Checkpoint, this sort of is like FMC, all that stuff. Difference though is on a per rule basis, you can assign it to a secure gateway. So what if I can do the first two to all my gateways, and then if I had a different internet rule versus another, if I had internet rule one and internet rule two, I could just assign it to its specific secure gateway in the security manager, and I can do that on a per firewall basis per rule. Per rule. So I can have 10 rules and they all 10 rules go to different firewalls. And they're just centralized here. Now, you might be asking, what about inter network rules? Well, as you can see here, and when I showed you the GUI, there's no such thing as zones on a checkpoint. And most times I configure this thing, and most people I talk to, they configure checkpoints. They don't really utilize zones. Checkpoints utilizes the route table. The routing table is highly important. So what you would do is you're going to say one network to a different network for some service, either drop or accept. The checkpoint logic is going to say, okay, I know this network gets connected over here on this interface, and the source is on this interface, the destination is going on this interface. So I'm going to use routing to determine where I'm going to go. I'm not actually going to use zones. Now, zones is a feature that you can figure on here, but most people don't use zones. Checkpoints were all based on routing. Routing determined the quote unquote zone a network was sitting into. And that was something that I like had to get over, especially when you're coming over from ASAs that had security levels, then FTDs that had zones, Palo Altos have zones, Fortinet has zones. When you come from a zone-based kind of style firewall and going to this type of firewall that bases everything on routing, and you don't really have zones, it can confuse you when you start configuring policies. Now, let's go to NAT. So this is basically your NAT. Now, these are all the NATs that you can configure. This is another thing that can potentially confuse a lot of people coming from other platforms to Checkpoint. Because when you create an auto NAT rule, it creates these two rules up at the top, right? Or these two auto NAT rules I have because I created it for the LAN going to the outside. So it was like if my LAN going to LAN for any, it's original on that firewall. Basically saying if I'm going from my network, if a packet's going from my network to my network, don't NAT it. I don't know why it does that. I forgot why it does that. I can't say I don't know why it does that, but I forgot why it does that. And when I first looked at it, I was like, this doesn't make any sense. And for most people that's probably looking at this right now, they're probably like, that doesn't make sense. Again, checkpoints work differently than what you're probably used to. Then we have, hey, if my LAN is going to any network, we're going to hide it behind the firewall interface. This is why internet is technically working right now. Now, this will cause an issue because let's say this was inter area, right? You had a inter zone, so to speak. You don't want this to get natted when it's going to another interface or another network out of another interface on your firewall, other than going to the internet. So this, when you read this, it can get a little wonky again because you're not really specifying the zone. And because you're not specifying the zone, and this is based on routing, logically you would say, okay, if this network was going to any other network on the firewall, it's going to net it behind the interface. And where do you see that at? Well, over here in objects. So you open this up real quick, you can figure a whole bunch of objects here. So again, what does this look like? Hello, looks like FTD, looks like Fortinet, right? Looks like, WatchGuard, SRXs. Again, you can figure your objects here and then you can use those objects in your policy. So I did a object over here. I think I did a network, and this is the Cali LAN. You open that up, and then you would put the LAN behind here, and this is where the NAT function. So when you know how in the other ones you would create a NAT policy or auto NAT policy or something like that? This you can actually create the NAT policy in the object, and then it will create these little statements here. So all I did was network translation. I'm hiding it behind the gateway. I could technically hide it behind an IP, or I could use a static NAT and then hide it behind IP. Again, you can assign the NAT rule on a per firewall basis. So I can go the same network. I can say, okay, I'm going to install this on either a specific firewall or all my firewalls. Because I only got one, I just had it on a specific firewall, and I can add a tag. Where did you see tagging? You saw tagging on a Palo Alto, right? So now you're starting to see where people are watching, different vendors are watching, and taking little bits and pieces of everybody to make their platform unique. All right, and then once you push that out, obviously internet's working. I believe I have it up here. So if I would go to, let's say, YouTube. Do. And as you can see, I can get to YouTube perfectly fine going through the checkpoint. Now, obviously, YouTube's going to give me a little bit of it's slow, so it's going to give me a little bit of crap to watch it. But as you can see, YouTube is working. Do. Gotta wait for it to. Is there anything like? I'm not going to do trending because I don't know what's going to. Whatever. So that comes up. Got to be careful doing that because you don't know what YouTube will pop up on you behind. Now, from a logging perspective, you have log and monitor. So if you go to logs, this is where you're going to see a lot of information, right? So these are all the logs that you can see, right? You can now try to go to web services. Obviously, it's not going to do that because I did not. This is a test environment, so you're not going. I'm not going to be able to go to Checkpoint and download things and all that good stuff. But as you can see, we got here's a log of my management host. As you let me spread this out here, and it'll show you my SMS hit the internet rule for DNS, right? And if you open it up, it'll give you a lot more information, right? So the same thing when you look at unified events in FTD, kind of gives you similar information. So I'm looking at this. I'm looking at the firewall blade. It was a connection type. Here's the source coming from our management server. It's coming from internal. Now it's internal because it's on the other side, but I didn't give it the zone internal. I didn't name anything internal. It's going outside to external, so it's going outside to the internet. Again, I didn't actually put any zoning there. Um, it is looking for DNS. It's telling me the destination, what Ethernet port it went out of. It shows me the NAT translation or the XLAT, and it shows me it's getting natted to the interface of my checkpoint. And then it says, hey, it was allowed, and it tells me the actual rule, which is the internet rule, which is rule number 3. As you said, that's a lot of information. Now, unified events gives you the same kind of stuff as well. With FTD, if you go to your blades, you can actually search it by blades. So if I say, show me all the logs on the firewall blade, it's going to look once it pops up, and it's going to show me all the logs for the firewall specific blade, right? Firewall specific blade. And obviously you can see it because it has this square. So you're going to see some drop rules, which was a cleanup rule. You're going to see some stuff that were allowed. You're going to see some more drop rules, which, what is this? Let's see what this was dropped for. Oh, this was a quick protocol. So I'm not allowing quick for, now this is going to, I remember I made a video a while back talking about this quick protocol and how SSL encryption is going to run into a problem because with quick protocol coming out, you're going to have to allow that. So let's go back to our security protocols, our security policy. And here's the ports I've allowed. So now we're going to search for quick. Let's see if we can find it. So now we added quick there, and we're going to publish, and then we're going to install. So now quick will be allowed, and then we won't see a bunch of drops for a quick protocol. So there's more stuff that I could go through, but this was just a brief overview of a checkpoint, how it works, sort of how the net policies, normal policies, what a blade is, what an SMS versus a security gateway is, and how checkpoint kind of was the father of everything that you see now in the next generation firewall space. So this is Don from Padlock Technologies. I hope this video was informative. I will be dropping more next generation firewall videos, whether it's checkpoint firewalls, whether it's FortiGate, whether it's Palo Alto or Cisco FTDs. I'll be dropping some more of those. I hope this video was informative. If you have questions, I did get a question from, I'm not going to say the name yet because I did not do the video, but you know who you are because you've been watching my videos and I appreciate the email. Um, I will just let you know that I'm working on that Azure space so I can do that request that you were asking for. So if you're watching this, just know I got your email. But if you have a question on a piece of technology that you would like answered, I don't know everything, but I do know a lot. So I can't promise you that I'll be able to answer it. But if I can, I will do what I just did for the person that sent me the email, give you a quick shout out, and then I will respond to your email when that video response is ready. There will be a video bumper on the end of this video to tell you exactly where to send those questions. Again, this is Checkpoint Firewalls, the granddaddy, the OG of network, next generation firewalls. Hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to share, comment, like, and subscribe. Thank you, and have a nice day.